in addition to looking forward to this conversation, it gives me a chance to publicly say thank you to you for helping us start out when we started the Continental Global Foundation. The U.S. ministry, as you know, completed its job in 2011, and then in 2013, we had all these internationally based groups out there, and they needed support, and so you helped us kind of lay the groundwork for that. So thank you. It's great to be with you today.
You're so welcome, and it's so great for me to be here.
Talk to me a little bit about, you're one of the ones that goes way back in the continental sphere, 69 through 71, I think you said.
Actually, I traveled on Cam's last tour that he did himself, 1968. And that was really funny. That was the second year that Continentals, as you well know, was an independent ministry. They became an independent ministry in 67,
right.
As you know, and I think wasn't there a big Continental Singers YFC Portland reunion here sometime?
Yeah, we call them the originals.
So. The original. Well, I'm not an original, but almost. I didn't know about the Continental Singers, and had been planning to. I'd been an exchange student in 1966 for the summer, so I had a passport, and I'd gone to Europe 67 after graduating high school. And 68, I was going to work all summer long. And my uncle, who was a pastor of First Baptist Church, Castro Valley, California, he said, "Byron, you got to come to my church this afternoon, a Sunday afternoon, and you've got to see this group that's coming to town, Continental Singers." And I hadn't really heard of Continental Singers, and by that time I'd studied classical piano for 11 or 12 years, and studied classical horn with the first horn of the San Francisco and Oakland Symphony for 6 or 7 years. Picked up banjo guitar when I was 13 and 14. And, I had my nose in the air a little bit about Christian music, even back in the 60s,
Right.
And I said, "Nah, I don't think so." And I was not a real solidly functioning Christian, and I was going to go see this girl that used to go to his church, and I went to her house, and she got called to work, and I had no place to go, so I came back over to the church and walked in the back. The concert of Continental Singers was already going, 1968, and I was stunned. Jim Bolden, African-American soloist, was singing, and Daryl Gardner was leading the band, whom I didn't know at that time. And Steve Ashton was playing drums. Bruce Ware was playing trombone, who sounded later on, I matched him with Bill Pierce and his trombone playing. It was like blown away. And a guy that I had sung in a Christian folk trio in 65, 66 for Youth for Christ in the East Bay of the San Francisco Bay Area, Oakland, and that kind of thing. He was playing trumpet, and I went out to see him, and he looked at me and said, "Spradlin, I forgot you play French horn, don't you? We are needing a French horn player." So he drags me down to Daryl Gardner at the front of the church, and on Daryl's French horn, I hadn't worked out, but I've been playing that year, and it was after my first year in college, and I played, and my mom was worried about me, and sort of I was in a relationship with someone, and and my dad was worried as well. And, it was $1,400. Give me a break. And I got a call the next day, and even without asking them, I said, "Yes, I'll come."
Wow.
They invited me in, and I went to a rehearsal that Monday. No, I had to work that night because I was working at the Oakland airport for a charter airlines company. I tried to quit. They said, "You can't quit today. You've got to come back to work." And so on Tuesday, I went to a rehearsal and left. I had, Ron Quintanilla was the guy, and he said, "Spradlin, you play the horn, and we're leaving for Japan on Friday, and we don't have a horn player." And so all that transpired, and off I went. And
Wow.
that's how I entered Continental Singers 5 days before we left for, we went to Hawaii and then Guam and then Tokyo and then Osaka and then Okinawa and Singapore and Thailand and then the Philippines. I mean, it was a wonderful tour.
Wow.
And that's how I got in to Continental Singers.
Crazy. What did that, you talked about your spiritual walk. What did that experience do for you on a spiritual level?
Well, I was thinking about that. You asked me to think about that. And I think that a couple of things struck me, which I jotted down. All that summer, we had a pretty big time evangelist with us from OC Ministries, and every night we were sharing the gospel, and literally we were having, besides churches and as small and medium-sized church, we were doing big things. 3,000 people would show up at many of these concerts, and
Wow.
and hundreds of kids. I remember in Singapore, 200 kids came forward. And I really was kind of a backslidden Christian at that time. I was really a believer. There's no question about that, but really convicted about a number of things that were going on in my life. And I stayed away from spiritual stuff. That night, 200 kids came forward, and the kind of the spiritual leader participant grabbed my arm and put 4 spiritual laws in my hand and said, share with this kid. I read the thing. I was a church kid. I knew all of the stuff, read the track to him, and the kid accepts Christ, and I am impacted. I mean, I'm going, whoa, this is crazy. Okay, so we go on, and several weeks later, we're in the Philippines. It's August now, and after an outdoor concert, there are like 3,000 people there, and I'm playing, French horn, and I'm going up and singing, and there's a couple of guys' numbers and playing my guitar and all of that kind of stuff, and this Filipino navigator guy comes up to me. I didn't know anything about navigators, and that didn't mean anything to me at that point. And starts talking to me. He could tell that I was out to lunch, and he did not, ignore me or brush me aside. He took me to the A&W root beer stand near the YMCA where we were staying 2 nights in a row. And I'd been this exchange student, and years we were thinking, okay, now I'm hanging out with the Nationals. I'm cool. And he just pummeled me with scripture. And on that Friday night, he challenged me on the steps of the YMCA where we were staying to surrender my life to Christ. And I did. I'm telling you, it was like a bucket of oil came over me. I went right upstairs and knew that I had to break up with my girlfriend. And I wrote her a letter, which I hadn't communicated all summer long to her. And the next day I met with the evangelist, and we talked, and I committed my life to missions, and I committed my music back to the Lord. I was going to be a diplomat, and actually I majored in international relations with a heavy dose of music from University of California. And in that experience, it moved me to see 2 things, and I'll try to wrap this up.
That's great.
Shortly. Marinating in the presence of the Lord, his word and his working changes a person. Marinating in it. I mean, everybody thought I was a Christian and all that. And I was, but just completely out to lunch. But here I was, not negative about God, just consumed with self, and marinating in the presence of the Lord and his people. A lot of wonderful Christians on that tour. Not everybody was, super functioning, but most everybody was. And his word every night. And then in our devotions on tour and interaction and Bible study, and then seeing God's working, it changes a person. And in that, with my first tour, it moved me to surrender to him and surrender to his service. And nobody put any pressure on me. It was the Lord.
Wow.
And I think that's what these kinds of contexts do. And it's why I'm also really happy that we've got these Continental Singers groups still going around the world. Aren't there like 16 of them now, did you say?
Yeah, at least maybe up to 20 this year.
Yeah. And I do pray that will move on. And perhaps that is the new way, that we don't have to worry about having a big dynamic here in North America. we've got, all this stuff, but in these other places, there's disproportionate impact. And then the second thing that really hit me was with my last 2 tours as a director, as I began actually allegedly leading these things, hopefully servant leading them, I saw a couple of things. It moved me to wrestle with the reality that inner private connect with the Lord is the foundation for outward public connect with the people he assigns us to minister to.
Yeah.
So this inner connection and this service and serving. So even now I talk about, we're not just Christian leaders, we're Christian servant leaders. And most of us are, like myself, are grassroots Christian servant leaders. And it all has to do with this inner private connection. I often say too, there's, in order to have powerful public ministry, you've got to have intimate, private, passionate ministry. And I don't care if you're charismatic or Presbyterian or, whatever your denominational background, this is just a biblical reality.
Yeah.
And not just a biblical reality, it's a real reality.
Yeah.
Which the Bible reveals through the working of the living word, the Lord Jesus, and the power of his Spirit for the will of the Father. How's that for Trinitarian theology? Regardless of our background,
Right.
and such. So that's, where this continental experience, and frankly, I would just say to any of us who are listening to these podcasts, right where you are. I mean, with those of us who've had Continental Singers experience, we've had more experience than the average choir or worship band person has in their entire life. We've had it in one summer or in one, tour experience, whenever that was.
Very true. Wow.
Those of you guys who are listening to this, and let me just not talk to Jim for a minute, but to all of you, you've got more chops and more experience than almost anybody, even professional, alleged worship arts pastors and stuff. Do something.
Have you ever wished you could gift your life-changing Continental experience to someone else? Well, you can. Your monthly giving can make a huge impact for our teams all over the world. Did you know that this year, we'll have more than 20 Continental groups on the road, communicating in 7 different languages? The Continental story goes on, so keep writing your part of it by being on our support team. And our groups will say, thank you, in 7 different languages.